Welcome everyone to NASCAD Artwork Alumni Talks. While our NASCAD community is a global one, our school, and by extension, our talk today is hosted in Chibuktuk in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq Nation. We're honored to speak, gather, and make artwork here. My name is Molly Cronin, and I'm the host of Artwork. And each month I have the opportunity to speak with two of our esteemed alum and discuss where their life and practices and careers have taken them since their time at NASCAD. And this week I am really excited to speak with Duane Jones, BDes 2004 Honors, and Marta Swannie, BFA 1994. And we're going to discuss design and branding and all about where their careers have taken them. So, Duane, Marta, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us, or me.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
My pleasure. So to get us started, I always ask our guests to just give a quick introduction. So if you could just tell us a little bit about where you're based and a few words about your practice. Maybe, Duane, I'm looking at you right now. Maybe we could get started with you if that's okay.
Will do. Michael LeBlanc, one of my former profs. I see you. Hey, Mike. Nice.
Hi,
Uh,
Michael.
Been a long time. So I'm currently still based in Nova Scotia. I came here for NASCAD and never left. Born in Bermuda, studied communication design in NASCAD, worked in graphic design and art direction for a bit. I currently work in records and information management at Dell. And then somewhere along the lines, I decided I want to get back to my art world, and I started this brand called Art Pays Me. And I'm now you caught me at a good time because I'm transitioning the brand slightly to be
Hmm.
more less of a clothing brand and more of a personal brand of my creative practice. So you'll find my art there now, you'll find my clothing, you'll find my podcast, you'll find any other thing that kind of personally relates to my creative practice in some kind of way. And yeah, yeah, I guess that's me in a nutshell.
Nice. Well, I'm really
Mhm.
excited to talk about all those elements. So thanks, Duane. Marta, can you tell us a little bit about yourself as well?
Yeah. So I'm in London, so I'm in London, the UK one. And I've lived here probably about 25 years now. So most of my career has been here, I'd say. And I'm a creative partner in a fairly large design agency called. So I work across a lot of branding projects, so creating new brands, visual identities, naming that sort of thing, but also more and more also in like what I guess you'd call the sort of commercial campaign space. So creating actually more like traditional advertising as well. So it sort of crosses between sort of a lot of design work, but then a lot of just creative ideation and creative work for campaigns as well.
And let's take a little trip back in time now. Marta, can you tell us a bit about what your time was like at NASCAD, what you were
Yeah.
interested in, who you were working with?
Sure. So my time at NASCAD, I had a great time at NASCAD. I studied what back then was called digital multimedia. It wasn't what I was planning to study at all. I was planning to do like jewelry and sculpture because I just wanted to make things out of metal, I think. I didn't do any of that. All I did was ended up studying digital multimedia. So I was like super excited about new technologies and interactive media and using like animation, video, sound to create new things in art making and storytelling. And we had a lot of great equipment at the time, which I think Michael will remember this. We had like alias software. It was really complicated, like 3D software, but we all kind of jumped on it and tried to learn how to use it. And I would say it was kind of a interesting time because it didn't really fit into any strict discipline. It was sort of design or art. Like I have a BFA, but you could study it if you were getting like a Viscom degree. So we kind of bounced around the two sides. So I studied with all sorts of great people. I studied with Gary Kennedy, Bob Rogers, Michael LeBlanc, who's on the call. Um, yeah, all sorts. So I think it was basically I was gravitating between towards the professors who kind of had an interest in technology and stuff. And it was all great. Bob Rogers taught me the best lesson, which was how to talk to your computer, which was just hilarious. It involved a lot of swearing.
It always does. Thanks, Marta. Duane, same question to you. Can you tell us a bit about your time at NASCAD and what you were doing and who with?
Yeah, so my time at NASCAD, man, it was a little bit of a lonely time. I was kind of a loner, and I wish well, I guess you can only do what you did, but I kept to myself a lot, and but I focused on. I went to Bermuda College before I got to NASCAD, and I skipped foundation, so I got entered pretty much directly into the graphic design program,
Mhm.
and from there, I mean, I remember having a lot of classes with Ludwig Scharf, and I kind of did a lot of illustration too. So I remember Michael Fernandez, and so I was like kind of between the fine arts side of things and the design side of things, kind of going back and forth, taking the art history, taking the drawing, taking the digital stuff. And then I was also drawn to I did the web a little bit. I was also, I mean, I did stuff with Frank Orlando, I see every now and then. Animation, there was a point where I was doing 3D animation, 2D animation. Uh, but I think, and I really but there was a point I really fell in love with graphic design specifically and sort of lost interest in art and really was interested in how different visual elements can be used to communicate a story or convince people to do things maybe they didn't want to do and things like that. I was just fascinated by that. And then I ended up applying to the communication design honors program. Didn't think I'd make it in. Somehow I got in there and I actually before that I had taken a semiotics class with Hanno Esses and I think that was kind of like a something that tripped something in my brain where I started to see um the way color theory and text the every single choice you make as a visual creator means something and will affect people in various ways depending on their cultural situation and their background, their age, whatever, the gender. So that stuff is where I got really fascinated with. So during the honors program, I kind of really went down that path and really just became a design nerd and was like in that studio with that cohort of 20 folks and yeah, that's pretty much a blur. I just remember working late nights, getting up early, doing presentations, and yeah, a lot of work, but a lot of fun. I miss it.
Well, you mentioned that you sort of like lost interest in a certain kind of art making and
Yeah.
you like veered towards design. And I think that's an interesting point to kind of pivot to my next question, which is about like kind of how you got to where you are now from NASCAD. And it seems like you've kind of merged those worlds of art and design. So can you tell us a bit about, yeah, how Art Pays Me began and what the inspiration was there?
Yeah, so when I left NASCAD, I assumed I would get an agency job at either a marketing or design agency right away. And interestingly enough, they weren't that interested in me. None in Bermuda were, none in Toronto, none here. So, but then luckily I found a job this with a magazine that was starting up. And I was like, back then, print magazine, that was like, that was gold. That's what I really, as a print designer, that I wanted to do that. So I had the opportunity to be the art director there and do the visual identity for it, design like every issue cover to cover. I brought in some other designers, worked with photographers, did all of that stuff. But the thing that I also learned was I got to sit in on some of the meetings with the publisher, and when he would go to say the Liquor Dome people and talk to them about advertising in the magazine and some of the things you had to do. I learned about distribution and how important that was and pricing and how like a lot of the ads in the magazine were given away for free to to make it seem like it's successful. So those little things about business I started to learn, and I was had zero interest in business before that. So I found that fascinating. And I guess the magazine ended up folding after a year and a half. And I had no job, no opportunities. So the only thing I could think was to start a business, started my business. And I mean, it was just design consultation at that point, but the way Art Pays Me came out of it was I got really frustrated with feeling like I had all this education, I had all this experience, all this knowledge, and folks didn't take me seriously. They just saw me as the visual polish on everything they had already figured out. And I've always, me having the semiotics background, I felt like design should be incorporated in every aspect of a process, and designers are more than just the aesthetics. We are a key part of the communication tool. So then it got me thinking, like, the agencies don't want me. My clients are getting on my nerves. I have a day job. Um, what if I create my own brand that, because I wanted to work for like a Nike, like one of those cool places. It's like, what if I do my own thing? And I make like portfolio, I make like a fashion show, and I have like a lookbook and all this cool stuff. And then it was like, it went from just like a fake, let me make this thing, to a real thing. I was like, yeah. Like, what happens when designers and artists or whoever you are take the middle person out of it and we just create our own products and we like, test those ideas that the clients rejected and bring it to life. And that's kind of the gist of where the Art Pays Me thing came from. It was me just saying, I have all these ideas I think are good that people keep telling me would never work. And I'm just going to put them out myself. And here we are.
Yeah, manifest too and say, I've got all this education, art can pay me, I'm gonna make it happen. You guys are gonna pay me for this. Awesome. Thanks, Dwayne.
Mm.
Marta, similar question to you. You said you started off um, in a kind of digital design capacity, which seems very in keeping with what you studied at NASCAD. But can you tell us a bit about starting off in the industry in that position and then like the transition into the kind of senior creative director role that you're in now?
Sure. So I moved to London for like a digital designer job, and I guess I kind of did the classic thing where you work through the agency. I quite quickly, probably way too quickly, actually looking back, got myself a creative director role at a digital agency when I was quite young, and that agency, it was quite good. It was quite exciting. But then me and the managing director of that agency decided to go off and start our own agency. So we set up our own digital agency, which was awesome, and we did that for 12 years. Um, and that was great, but I learned a lot about how I learned a lot about business doing that. Some good lessons, some bad lessons. But I guess it was kind of a crash course into suddenly being responsible for like everything that you do in the creative realm. So I was really responsible for all the creative team. I was the only creative director there, and my business partner was in charge of all the admin and finance stuff. And I sort of, when I look back, I kind of think I did my career backwards because since then, I'm now in a really big agency. Most people go and work at a really big agency and then they leave to start up on their own. I totally did it wrong. Like I totally did it backwards. But it was a great experience. And so we did a lot of like pretty out there digital work at the time. It was quite pioneering. Like we did crazy projects for people like Red Bull and PlayStation. And they were, at the time, this was the heyday of PlayStation. If anyone's seen like their old ads from 20 years ago, it was really quite out there stuff. And so that was a lot of fun. We just helped them like promote a lot of games in very interesting, weird ways. And we did projects like we did a project where we had everyone in the UK submit messages to like transmit into space to the nearest known planet that might have like the capacity to have human beings on it. I think it was at the time going to take 28 years to get there, so it will be any year now. And it was a big project called A Message from Earth. It was just like lots of fun stuff.
Hmm.
And so I did that, and we also did a little bit of product development. So we developed a few, like we did some digital products that we then developed and licensed to clients. So it was kind of a mix of trying to do work for clients, like creative work for clients, but also trying to sort of, with our entrepreneurial hats, trying to also develop like some tech platforms at the same time. Um, and I eventually we ended up selling that off. And then I took about 6 months off. And then I started working in this big design agency, which was at the time it was called Brand Union. Then it merged and became Super Union. Then it merged. Now it's Design Bridge. So that was kind of how I ended up, I guess, at Design Bridge. And I was quite senior at that time in terms of a creative director. Creative director. So that's why I'm a creative partner there now.
Such an interesting, yeah, like path to take. Like as you said, going from the small to the large in that way is really compelling. Um, and it's interesting to hear some of those examples, and I'd love to maybe like talk a bit more about some of the work you've done, and specifically like if you could tell us a bit about what goes into establishing a visual identity, or how do you kind of navigate some of these more risky or innovative approaches to branding. Can you talk about any more examples, like moments of growth or moments of growing pains that you experienced as a designer and as a kind of brand
Yeah.
consultant this way?
Sure. I mean, I guess the first part of the question about what goes into creating an identity or brand, I think for me, 100% all of the time, and what I promote hugely at the agency is that the most important thing is like the creative idea, like a super single-minded creative idea that informs everything that you do after that. And it's not just informing like what the visual identity and the design is, but a strong creative idea should inform everything. The activities the brand does, what it looks like, what it smells like, how it moves, what activations it does, what kind of campaigns it does. So that part's really core. And that usually comes, we usually come to that creative idea based on some kind of interesting insight. And that's often when you have a big agency, you might have some strategists kind of helping you find those interesting insights. And from that, you create like a creative platform. But for me, like that's incredibly important. And if you don't have like a really simple, single-minded creative idea at the heart of everything you do, then it makes your job 10 times more difficult and probably won't be as good or successful. So like that's 100% the key. So I'd say that. What was the rest of your questions? Feel like there was
Um,
about three.
yeah, sorry, that was it was a long question. Uh, I think I was inspired by your some of your examples and how like how kind of creative and innovative they were as strategies. And I was wondering if you had advice on how to navigate some of those risky or more out there design choices. And then, yeah, if you had
Yeah.
more examples of moments of growth or growing pains that you kind of wanted to highlight from your career.
Well, I think that navigating, like, sometimes I feel like this is going to not sound horribly negative, but sometimes I feel like there's a lot of mediocre stuff in the world. And what we
Yeah.
don't need to do is produce more mediocre stuff. So you kind of have to push and push and push to try and do something like different and original and innovative and out there as much as you can with clients. Like and it's difficult because you have to take them along this journey and convince them that doing this radical thing is going to be okay. And that's probably half the job. It's not easy. And you have to develop a relationship with the people you're working with, both your team, but also your clients. And if they trust you, and if you can take them on the journey, then you're more likely to be able to get there. If not, clients are nervous and also they're spending a lot of money. So it's difficult, for them to kind of trust in the whole kind of journey to do something different, but it will pay off. The dividends will pay off, right? Like they'll get better success, they'll get noticed, they'll get more of an audience. So I think that's a super challenging part of the job, and navigating feedback from clients. Like that's why going to university is so great, because you just get to do what you want to do, and you don't have other people telling you that you have to change, to change things. So
Yeah.
I think that that's like a massive challenge, and it's a challenge for anybody who's going to go work in kind of agency world and have clients. Um, so I think that is like a massive challenge. But it's not like some clients aren't also like wanting to do that too. So it's not always difficult. It just can be very difficult.
Can I
Yeah.
can
But
I
fun of it, right?
Yeah,
uh,
go ahead, Dwayne.
I so I have two questions for that in response to that. Well, and an observation. So when I started my brand, one thing I noticed was I caught myself doing the same thing my clients did, where, oh, now it's me that's paying for all of this stuff. So I would get more conservative about what I'd be willing to try and do. So I was like, damn. So it did make me a better at working with clients because I could empathize with them on that way. But I was also wondering from a systemic standpoint, one of the people I know who works in branding, do you have like a systemic process for developing a brand every time that you go through, or we do this and then we go through this and then we go through this and then we go through that?
Yeah, there is a process, but it's sort of tweaked, like it's sort of malleable, and it will depend on the brief, but there's a certain process for sure, that we tend to use. But I guess there's a process, and then you take the bits of that process that you want to apply to the work that you're doing. But it's helpful because it's a framework, right? Just to work around, which is
Right.
good. But I was just thinking about that, like trying to do things differently. I worked on a project. Well, actually, we just rebranded a big esports company called ESL. It just launched this summer, and it's the second time that we've branded them. So I did it before in 2017 or something, and and I pushed them to do such a radical rebrand in 2017 that the entire thing went from like a very corporate blue color to like neon green, and it had like hidden gaming imagery in the visual patterns, and it was fairly radical at the time, and it was all going well. And then about 3 days before launch, the CEO suddenly got cold feet, and he was like, "We can't launch this. We can't launch this." And I was going like, "What do you mean? Like we're 3 days away from launch, and there's things rolling out all over the place." And in the last moment, like he turned around and went, "Okay, okay, we're launching it." And then it became, because it was so different, everyone was talking about it. I mean, probably like Marmite, like some loved it, some didn't, but it was definitely radically different. And then the same CEO years later, I saw him on stage and he was talking and he was going, "And then we decided we were going to radically turn neon." Like, and he was like taking all this great credit for this radical move he had made for the brand, which was great, but it was really funny. So, you never know when someone might pull the plug.
Well, Dwayne, it's really interesting to hear you talk about being kind of like both the client and the designer in that moment. And can you talk us through a bit about like, yeah, some of those growing pains of developing Art Pays Me, the moments you maybe took more risks or um yeah, like what it's like kind of navigating being like the dual role of like creating a visual identity for your own brand.
Yeah, so my business was originally registered as Glitterati Communications, and man, again, like that was just me. Oh, I used to ride an Italian brand scooter in Bermuda. And so like I was just like and then I wanted to do fashion. So I was like, I gotta sound Italian, you know? And I had this word glitterati. And then it turned out it actually had a real meaning. And so I just leaned into that. And that I started this clothing brand called Be Glitterati, where, you as the artists are the glitterati of society. And you want to be the glitterati. Problem is, it was so much education had to go with teaching people what this word glitterati meant. People couldn't pronounce it, which could be a benefit. I mean, not eye-catching makes people pay attention. Like, yeah, there were pluses and minuses to it, right? But the thing that was really a fail for it was I was literally just like throwing anything out there. I put a machine gun on a shirt because it looked cool. I put this on a shirt. I put this weird lyric on it. Uh, it it didn't necessarily have a direction. And then where I asked about this process because my friend Bo, who's a fellow NASCAR alumni, he had an agency at the time, and he took me through his branding process, and we talked about why I wasn't experiencing growth and why, people clearly liked what I do, but something's missing. And then we focused on this thing that I kept talking about, which was art pays me, and this whole related to the frustration I had as a designer, not being people wanting my work for free, et cetera, et cetera. And our parents telling us, everyone telling us that you can't make money as an artist, when we all know that's false. And he said, I had made one shirt that had art pays me on it. And he said, maybe that is the focus. Like, what happens if you stop doing all this other stuff and your focus is creative people that relate to this struggle? And changed the name to Art Pays Me. And he was like, if you don't take that name, I'm taking it. And I got the URL right away. And that right there, I would say was a big turning point for me. But then also, when I say the risk, it's like I have a product-based business. People come up to me all the time and say, you should put this on a t-shirt, it would sell. It's a great idea. But I gotta spend hundreds of dollars up front just to make a small run, and then it may not sell. Sometimes you sell zero product. So, you know, and then there are ideas that I love that I truly believe in that I put out and they don't sell. So there's always that risk of that thing in your head where you're like, do I trust my instinct to do the really wild design that I really want to put out that I love? But I don't know if anyone else is going to get it, or do I just put out more things with the logo on it because I know more people will be into that. So that's the kind of juggle that I go through. And any other thing, like, is it worth it to spend money on this partnership or this marketing thing or there's that? There's so many things that as a designer, I would just be like, you gotta, and I agree with you, Marta, actually, like it's actually better to put something out that people hate than it is to put something out that people are just like, they're not talking about it. So as long as they're talking about it, honestly, it works. But like you got to stand on something, you got to push those boundaries. And that's the inner struggle for me where I'm like, I got to find that right balance of commercial saleability and am I still pushing myself and pushing the brand to do interesting things?
Or can you use your, the stuff that sells well to fund the more radical stuff?
And that's exactly. So that's why I still have a foot in the commercial world. I still do some consultation here and there because I might do, a branding project for someone and that funds my next run of blanks that I buy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because it's good to sort of related, but in our agency, we obviously we work for a lot of massive global companies, but what we try and do is allow those big jobs to allow us to do a lot of pro bono work as well, so that we can kind of use some of those profits for good effect and make ourselves feel a bit better.
Yeah.
Yeah, Duane, you mentioned some of the different elements of Art Pays Me. You've got the clothing line, obviously. You've also got a podcast. Can you talk about all of the different components of Art Pays Me? Like, how does art pay you? What is the structure of the business and the brand?
Yeah. So I can tell you about one new um part of the brand that just started yesterday that I failed on. Uh I got asked to do one of those paint and sip sort of things,
Sure. Yeah.
where you sit in front of a group of people and you paint something and blah, blah, blah. Not really my bag, but I said, I'll give it a shot. And the price was right. Uh, I messed up. It was actually, I thought it was today. It was actually yesterday. So I lost that money. But that's a digression. But this is kind of where I guess the business model that I look at is I kind of flow with what feels right. So it started out first of all like I created this fashion brand. I want to get rid of my clients. That was my goal. I'm getting rid of my clients. I'm going to sell my own products. I'm going to lean into that. And then it was like, okay, I can't necessarily afford to spend a lot of money on advertising. I love podcasting. I feel like there aren't enough people that have my life experience as a black man, as a designer, as an artist, who are talking about the things that I would want to talk about, or from a Nova Scotian standpoint too. So I was like, I'll create that. And that could be a way I also promote my brand and build networks with people outside. So it became sort of a marketing thing. Over time, also become a revenue stream because, say, Craft Nova Scotia, for instance, they liked what I do, and they said, "Would you be interested in doing a short series called Craft Pays Me?" And I see Julie Roswell's on there, actually. She was instrumental in that. So then you get paid to do these like little partnership things here and there. So that's another revenue stream. And then because I'm leaning more into my fine art side of things, I don't have gallery representation. So what's the best thing I have for me? I have my Instagram. So I can use that to and my website. So I can use that to help me promote my fine art practice and then get myself into these group shows where I can sell my paintings. So I'm doing that. And then I'm still doing consulting, but what I did now, instead of just like taking any job, I'm being more selective about are they paying what I want to be paid and not just feeling guilty about that. Um, Sometimes you feel snobby, at least I did anyway. You feel snobby when people would give you that sticker shock reaction about that's what you want
Mhm.
to charge. And now I'm just okay with like they're not for me, and that's okay. So I'm being more selective that way, and also I'm taking on projects that I feel align more with my values and more with what Art Pays Me does. So I've done some apparel collaborations. I did some menstrual cup branding for my sister-in-law. They have a menstrual cup brand called Best Period that's being carried in CVS in the States. So that feels right to me. So I'm kind of leaning into that. And then like the big one, uh, basketball. I love basketball. So I used to think like, oh, I'm a fine artist. We don't do sports, blah, blah. I gotta like make that separate. And I'm just leaning into it, talking to basketball people about art and stuff like that, and realizing there's more people that have that shared overlap. And then I was able to get this huge commission where I designed these basketball courts in Halifax. So that's bringing my and to take that back, I did a group show for my paintings, and the guy that runs the Halifax Mural Festival reached out to me maybe 2 years after that show. He was in the show too, and said, "Duane, have you ever done a mural? Would you want to do one in Halifax Mural Festival?" It's like, no, but I'll try it. And that led me to being comfortable doing public art pieces, which then led me to the basketball thing. So
Right.
now I have that as another thing. So I've done multiple murals since that last one. So it's things like that. I'm going with the things that feel good, but I'm also trying to uh yeah, as long as I'm trying to find things that align but work within the vision that I have for the Art Pays Me brand per se, I guess.
Yeah, and it seems like, as you move away from like fulfilling clients' wishes and desires, you get to really focus on the things you really want to do. You get to kind of like hone in on your own authenticity, and then the things that align with that kind of fall into place, and you do the work to make them connect. So that makes a lot of sense, and it sounds, yeah, that's really great. And I was thinking about what you said about your friend Bo and how he kind of helped identify what was really strong in what you were doing. And Marta, you were talking a bit about like managing, uh, working in a kind of um, uh, in a like collaboratively in an agency setting, and clearly like Duane, like it was really great to have this collaboration with a friend and kind of identify the work. And I want to maybe, yeah, ask Marta about the kind of collaborative nature of what you do and how you kind of balance your own creative desires with like the yeah, collaborative nature of the agency world that you're working in.
Yeah, it's interesting. I sometimes I think having done a lot of work digitally, back at NASCAD and when I was studying, because a lot of the time you're like dealing with so many things like music and sound and video and this and that, you're often getting help from a lot of people. And I feel like that set me up quite well for collaborating later in agency life because that's what it is. You have multiple projects happening at the same time. So there's, you're collaborating with different teams and the teams are anywhere from 3 or 4 people to much, much bigger, like 15, 20. So collaborating is really important. And how I do it, everyone does it differently, I'm sure. But I'm a true believer that like you should be pretty flat in structure. It's the days of like a creative director going, do my vision and have no say is like over. I think that's totally old fashioned. So it's very much about kind of bringing people around. This is going to sound a bit sneaky, but it's also about bringing people around to your vision. But you want it to do it in a way that you're developing it together, not saying this is it. Um, and that's I think that's good because when you have this, like when you have a strong sort of clear idea, everyone can kind of gravitate to that and then help make it better or help figure out how it gets developed. So it's another reason why you have to be like super clear with what that creative idea is. But the whole collaboration aspect, I mean, I really love it, and I love working with people from all levels. I particularly actually really love like the juniors that come into the agency because they're so like the energy and stuff that the I don't know, they're not sort of jaded. They're like really bright-eyed and like excited. And I just love it. Like I think the whole agency world needs more and more juniors. And it's actually the trickiest position for them to be in, especially when you live in a really expensive city like London, because it's really hard to pay your rent and stuff like that. So I think like it's a massive problem for agencies and we need to do something about it. I'm really getting sidetracked on that one, but it's just to say that like collaboration is best when it's diverse, right? And that you've got like people from different backgrounds and different ages, especially if you're doing, I mean, in all aspects, I think, but particularly also if you're doing like work like for consumers in the commercial world, like you have got to be able to reflect the audience you're talking to internally if you're going to make good work that connects with those people.
Well, that actually is a nice segue into I'm gonna, we're gonna open it up to questions from the audience in a moment, but to close it off on my end, I was wondering if you had any advice for some of those juniors or the people who would like to become juniors in the industry. Um, do you have any advice for people who might like to do what you do, people from NASCAD coming into this world?
That question to me or to
Yeah,
Duane?
sure. Let's start with you and then we'll go to Tony.
Uh, well, I think my best advice, I guess my advice would be to do whatever to not worry about doing things that scare you, because probably if it scares you, it's a really good thing to do. And it's a really difficult thing to do that because it can, it's pretty nerve-wracking to do scary things. But I think if you really want to go and have some great experiences, you really need to push yourself into the unknown. And
Mm.
just I think my advice would be to do it. Don't worry about it. Just do it, even if it seems like it's impossible. Um, to do it. Yeah, that would be my advice. And to not also to not give up and to trust your instincts, which are also hard things to do. I appreciate.
That's really good advice. Thanks, Marta. Duane,
So
any advice?
I kind of missed part of the question. I started reading the chat and
Oh, that's okay. My
I,
question was like for if you were speaking to NASCAD students who are looking to do the kind of work you're doing now, do you have any advice for them?
uh yeah, I actually I like what Marta said about like not being scared. I think especially at a younger age, I wish I did that a little more too. I mean, I kind of did, but it is good to just like just try anything and see what feels good for you, what works for you. Uh, don't be afraid to, even if it's uncomfortable, just reach out to people in the industry that you want to work in and talk to them about it, what it's like, what's the pain point. I mean, the sometimes the thing of like I get the can you have a coffee with me thing sometimes. That's not always the approach, I think, because I got a lot of stuff to do, and a lot of those people you might want to talk to do, but build genuine relationships with them, attend the events where they might be at, apply for things, just be seen, be active, and be doing the thing. And if you can't find clients that work in the way that you want to work, then create the project yourself in some kind of way so that you at least have something that you can show and talk about.
Yeah, that's great advice. Okay, I've got a couple of things in the chat. I'll touch on one or two of them from this one from Kemi. Um, let's see. Marta, do you
Mhm.
think that you would have had the same career trajectory if you had stayed in Halifax or Canada? Is a question from Kemi.
I don't think it would have been the same if I'd stayed in Halifax. I
Yeah.
think when we all graduated, I graduated with a couple of friends. We all sort of had studied the same thing. And I remember there was like one job and
Mhm.
everybody in town applied for it, and obviously only one person's going to get it. So I feel that's kind of what pushed me to look for jobs elsewhere, like London. So I sort of feel like obviously moving somewhere like London, there's like so many agencies and you're exposed to like big clients and great talent. It's a really lucky, fortunate place to be. And I was super, super lucky to be able to come here and work on some great projects and learn a lot. And I think obviously it sort of, I guess, that happened a lot faster being able like it happened faster being in London than probably it would have been in Halifax. Having said that, when I started my own agency and got into that, um, doing like creative work for clients, but also like trying to develop well, not trying, we developed a few digital products. That would have been a perfect thing to do in Halifax. I reckon there would have been, that I don't feel like you necessarily needed to be here for that. Um, and I think in Canada, maybe like perhaps in Toronto or maybe in a bigger city. But I think for the work that I do, you need to be in a big city center because you're working with businesses who are also there. It's not it's not like 100% remote all the time, and I think the opportunities, perhaps unfairly, but the opportunities are coming to those locations.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, one more from Kemi, and then we'll open it up to the rest of the chat. Duane, do you foresee a time when you might be able to do Art Pays Me as like a full-time job, or do you think it's wiser to stay having this 9 to 5 that funds the creative project?
Yeah, that is the goal. I
Yeah.
do think it is possible, to be honest. I think also I started Art Pays Me when I think one of my kids was a newborn and the other one was two, something like that. And I was doing a master's degree part-time. So like my kids have been small for most of the time I've been doing this, and now they're teenagers, and I have more time to dedicate to going to different markets or whatever the case may be, or just put time into things in general. So now that I'm doing that, I'm starting to see it like see more results in terms of sales and exposure and things like that. And also the what I realized, I don't necessarily think there's a market large enough in Nova Scotia for me to focus on just the artist.
Mm.
I mean, you got an artist that wants not everyone wants a graphic tee. Now, that's not everyone's thing. Fine. So my interest has always been international, and for the type of art I make as well, I I'm the co-chair of the Canadian Art Foundation. We talked about this recently, and it's just like there are certain markets, like a bigger city, as Marta mentioned, you when you want to sell a certain type of art at a certain price point, you just have to be present in some of those places.
Hmm.
So in order for me to make Art Pays Me work as a full-time gig for me, I have to strategize how to get myself more seen in some of those places. Podcast is a good way to do that. It's not enough. Maybe I do need to. I've thought about making Art Pays Me its own gallery so that I could game the system and put myself out there in certain situations and art fairs or whatnot.
Hmm.
That may not work. So maybe I need to get a gallery to represent me and still do my thing. So I do think it's possible. I just have to find I have to take a few steps going forward. But yeah, as of right now, business is really good and diversifying what I'm doing has been great. I've got a painting commission for Nova Scotia Legal Aid coming up, and that wouldn't have happened if I wasn't doing some of the other things. So I see Andrea Shang Jackson in there. We have some stuff that we've been partnering on, and it's I have my hands in a lot of different pots. Then I find that's been helpful to getting me to where I need to be. But it's like it's just the matter of does my brain let me stick to it? Does my time let me stick to it and keep going? And it's possible. Yeah,
Yeah, of course. Okay. Thank you, Kemi, for those questions. If anybody else has questions for our guests, feel free to turn your camera on and ask it or pop it in the chat and I'll read it out loud. A question in the chat from Erin. Have there been times where you didn't want to do art as a career? Do
I
you guys have any
can.
thoughts on that? Anytime you felt like you wanted to be, yeah, in a different industry or didn't want to be doing this creative work?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Uh, so the Art Pays Me brand started that way too. So I was working at Dow as a graphic designer, and I was in the medical school, very conservative in terms of design anyway. Like, I'm doing not fun stuff,
Yeah.
just basic whatever. And then I was doing my client work, and my clients weren't really wanting to do anything outside of the box. They just wanted to do what their nearest competitor was doing. And can you just do a version of that, Duane? So I was like, that's not going to get you what you think it's going to get you. I was frustrated. So I said, I'm done. I took on this master's degree at Dow in information management,
Mm.
which ironically ends up being another type of design. And I was like, I'm out of the industry. And it wasn't until I got in there into the cohort and I realized that the people that were in there with me who had no art and design background, they really respected my perspective as a creative person and what I brought to that industry. And then it got me reframing how I interacted with my clients and things like that. And like Marta said, like maybe if you understand where they're coming from and you build a real relationship with them, then I started being able to push my clients to do more interesting things because now I could understand what their pain points were and things like that. And I was also like, maybe there is something here in this art thing. Like, maybe I can still do it. So it's like I went from completely wanting to just quit and become an information manager to like, I guess I'm just going to do both for for a bit until I can't.
Marta, what do you think? Have you ever had any moments of where you didn't want to be doing this kind of creative work or working as an artist?
No, I mean, I knew by the time I was graduating, I knew that well, I felt really like I needed to graduate and get a job. So I thought I wasn't going to try and make it as like a full-time artist, and that's why I went into kind of, the commercial space. And um, but for me, the outlet of creativity in that space was totally fulfilling. Like there's never a day that I wouldn't want what I'm doing all day to be involved in like um the creative kind of realm, for sure. And I actually, to the point where I feel sometimes, I know it's going to sound totally cheesy, but I feel sometimes that I'm super lucky that some of the projects I'm working on, like one in particular right now, is so enjoyable and it's so great that the team often look at me and go, I can't believe we're getting paid for this, because that's how much like fun it is. So it's like it's lots of creative problem solving. It's tough. It's not easy. But it's also like it's ambitious and we're working hard, but it's just joyous and fun. And I almost don't want to say it because it's like I don't want it to be too good to be true, but it like feels like that sometimes. But it's tough, and it's stressful. Pitching is stressful. I do a lot of pitching, and that is hard work. I could probably live with not having to pitch ever again, but it's not going to happen. But in terms there's definitely never been a point where I didn't want to have like creative kind of work to be doing when I wake up every day.
Yeah, and like, Dwayne, you find yourself back in the creative world even when trying to do another career. It's something that's hard to shake, right? We're creative people. It shapes everything we do. So it's not something we can easily escape, even if we wanted to. Okay, we've got a few questions. Holly is wondering, what do you think is the role of creative thinkers in business as a whole? How can NASCAD graduates impact the economy and society? Um, and how does that compare to more practical training like engineering or MBAs? I think this is a important question at the moment where a lot of uh, like liberal arts and humanities programs are being threatened or cut in Canada and the US, and there's a question of like what value can artistic um, training bring to us as people working into the economy. So, do you have any thoughts on how on the role of creative thinkers in business as a whole and like what artistic training at NASCAD brought to your work in business?
Um,
Whoever has got a
I
thought.
do. I do. And as someone who works in an office too, it does overlap. It's I think what I learned, I think there are benefits to both lines of thinking. So us as creative people, we don't always like too much restriction and too much structure. We like to let things happen as they happen sometimes, and that's great. That allows us to have unexpected successes, but it can also be a distraction and sometimes. And I find that when I'm in business situations, a lot of what they do is they're good at honing in on efficiency and productivity and saying this thing worked, let's replicate that. There is something of benefit to that we can all learn from and use. However, the problem is that that's what leads us to boring movies. That's what leads us to boring everything. Because eventually people are like, oh yeah, that thing worked, so let's do it again. And that's why like AI stuff is taken off because people are just like, oh, just make it the thing and do it again and do it again. But us being able to, what differentiates us from like AI and other things is that we're just gonna zig randomly one day and we're gonna throw the neon green in there.
Mhm.
And the hard thing with my semiotics training too, where I'm like, you need the justification for it. But honestly, as an artist, sometimes I'm like, no, I don't have to justify it. I just threw it in there because I like it. And those things make you stand out in the business world. And those are things that businesses need, in my opinion. And great entrepreneurs are like that. They're very creative. They're artists in my mind because they're able to just bang, 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 come up with ideas but they're just not visual. So I think that's where our creativity helps.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Marta, do you agree? Do you have any thoughts on this question?
Absolutely. I mean, like creative thinkers will be great in every industry. And I think, creative thinking, obviously, I mean, it has to apply to every category there is, right? Like you want people who are creative thinkers and also problem solvers. Like a lot of the work that we do is it's about creative problem solving, so it's something that your brain is like working on all the time. And I think that can be beneficial to like any industry. I'm absolutely positive it is. And I think the idea that it's not being recognized is totally absurd.
Yeah, like you said, it's like you both said it's valuable in every industry, and uh, creative thinking is something that is applicable to every job, really. Um, there's another question for you, Marta, in the chat. Julie Roosevelt is asking, Marta, you mentioned doing work for large clients, allowing you to take on pro bono projects. Is there a big difference between working with large and small clients, particularly when looking at creating branding for individual artists or craftspeople? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Um, so I guess the biggest difference for the working with the large and the small clients is actually the small clients in some ways you can usually do more. They're
Mm,
nicer projects in some ways because you just have less people feeding back. It's a smaller group. You can kind of work a little bit more closely together. You can, in general, it's just a kind of easier way to work. And I feel like often the smaller projects you almost feel like you can be more creative on them. You've got less CEOs going, no, you can't do
yeah.
that, or sort of thing. So it is different. And in fact, to the point where we try and balance it for people, like when people have worked on big projects for a while, we try and give them a nice little small one because it kind of, you want to balance like the experience for them. Um, Creating branding for individual artists and craftspeople, because that's an interesting question because is it's so personal, like that it's in some ways that's a little bit tricky in that you have to interpret almost a whole person. Like when you're doing a business or a brand, you're using like you're taking a lot of inputs for different areas, but when it's a person, you have to really get to know them.
She might have jumped out.
Oh dear. Okay.
Those.
Okay, well, I'm sorry I missed the last bit of what she said. Um, and I'm sorry I was having a little bit of internet problems here. But Duane, thanks so much for joining us today. It was so nice to chat with both of you. Everybody check out Marta and Duane's work. You can find Art Pays Me online, listen to Duane's podcast where he's doing just like he's doing my job on the other side of this. And join us next month for our next artwork and keep in touch. Thanks,
Oh,
everybody. Oh, yeah,
like
go for it.
latest episode just dropped is a NASCAR alumni, Kim Kane, is on
Oh,
there.
awesome.
So yeah, check it out.
Great. Thanks, Duane. Yeah, check it out, everybody.
All right. Thanks, Taylor.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.